Indeed it is. Now I will say, welcome to the regular meeting this Wednesday evening, March 5th, 2025. I now call this meeting to order. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please call the roll.
Chair Fields,
Present.
Vice Chair Winter.
Here.
Commissioner Chiappi. Commissioner Ocampo. Here. And Commissioner Crowe.
So we have a quorum. Excellent. And with that, a reminder, we are holding meetings in person. If you're interested in speaking during public comment, please complete a request to speak form and submit it to the recording secretary. Very good. With that, I will look to one approval of the regular meeting minutes. Do I have a motion?
So
Excellent.
Vice Chair Winter.
Aye.
Commissioner Ocampo.
Aye.
I'm sorry, it was this is Trout. Right? You second the motion?
I second.
Okay, so sorry. We gotta start again. Vice Chair Winter.
Aye.
Commissioner Trout.
Yes.
Chair Fields.
Aye.
Commissioner Chiappi.
Aye.
And Commissioner Ocampo.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries 5-0.
Excellent. Next, we are on public comment. Members of the public wishing to comment on any item not appearing on the agenda may address the commission at this time. State law prevents us from taking action on any matter not on the agenda. However, your comments may be referred to staff for follow-up. Public comment is limited to a total of 15 minutes. However, an opportunity for additional comment may be provided later in the agenda. That being said, do we have any non-agendized public comment?
Yes, we have actually one request for general public comment. And based on our rules, we're gonna do 3 minutes.
3 minutes, very good.
And we're gonna have the timer here.
Okay.
Very good. So let's set up the timer and then we can hear from our. Very good. Please let us know who is.
Michael Ray.
Okay, better get started there.
Please.
So a couple things. First of all, I want to thank you guys for all sitting on this commission. It's really important, Parks and Recs, and I was involved in coaching and stuff like that. So it's very important you guys get overlooked a lot of times. Your budget is very good, and I know you guys are, doing the best you can. A couple things. I'm the president of the Beresford Hillsdale Neighborhood Association, and it's been kind of a long, kind of late, stretched out procedure to get the park that we had that was looked at several years ago, the East Hillsdale Park. It's called the Hidden Park. It's on 31st Avenue and runs into the lanes. They had come out a couple of years ago. They had talked about putting it together, and it still doesn't seem to appear to be in motion. So I just wanted to find out, bring back to my association any update on that. The other thing is we also have the West Park, and I know, it's kind of a push, but that park is in dire need of some upgrades. The equipment is old, the basketball court is pretty well chopped up. When it rains, it's not really functional, so that if that could be on, I know you're looking at a long-term kind of a 5-year plan, if I'm correct. The other thing is, and this is new, and maybe you haven't had a chance to think about it, but the Hillsdale Mall is going through a renovation. They're gonna tear it down and that type of thing. So it's gonna add thousands of more people when it's complete. Evidently, they're putting in like 1,500 units. And so we are gonna need in that area some more parks. Now, whether they need to put some money in, I'm not sure if that's part of what their assessments are as far as, contributing to the park and rec, but I think that should be something that should be on the agenda, in the way you look at the budget and how much money you think that, or if they have the ability to put money into, establishing parks or putting it into the funds, because it will be adding a fair amount of people into the community, into our community especially. And so those were the comments that I tried to make. But as of now, if we could get back to, okay, I got 35 seconds, if we could at least come back to us with some kind of idea when, that I could lay onto my, we have a board meeting coming up pretty soon with neighborhood, the East Park, the time schedule on that, because it seems to be delayed, and we would like to see it started, or at least have an update on when that may be at least started, so we can give the idea to the residents, what to expect. And so those are my comments, and I appreciate your listening. Thank you. Perfect. Use it all.
Thank you for your comments. Do we have any further public comments?
No, that's the only public comment.
Very good, thank you. With that, I will close public comment. And we move to item number 2, proposed 5-year fiscal years 26 to 30, Parks and Recreational Capital Improvement Plan. And we move here from Suzette. So
wait for this slide deck because we want to see the pretty picture on the front. So there we go. So that picture I'll just call out is our rendering of what's going to be going in at Central Park, the updated rendering. The item just went to City Council. And I just want to put that on the front because it's been a long way to get there, and this is how we get there, this process. So next slide. So what we're talking about is the capital improvement plan, the CIP, and this is how we prioritize and the process of prioritization, and that's just a boring definition. Next slide. So I wanted to show you this. This is actually from a presentation that went to council by our finance department last year, from the last 5-year process, and just to kind of see where we lie in the city overall. So this was the 5-year projected needs, and we really fit in that blue box, the Parks and Recreation, and that's in that's 23 million, not 23,000. There's a little asterisk on the bottom, but and we really fit in those 2 categories, the facilities and buildings, right? A lot of the buildings in the city actually are ours, and so we fit neatly in that box. Not all of that is ours, but a decent chunk of it is. And then the parks, right? So that's kind of just the overview generally for the city. There are lots of things to spend money on, and we're just a small part of that. Okay. So yeah, next slide. So first we look at how much money we're gonna get. And I want to call out that first number because that's a number that was calculated, right? We went through every building permit in process, estimated their fees, totaled them up. We also really thought about how to deal with the wild swings that we get. It can be as low as, I think the lowest fiscal year that I was looking at was 139,000 to last fiscal year where it was 8 million. And those are pretty wild swings. So it's really hard because if you have a developer come out and they say, yeah, we're going to build this, put in a planning application and it goes nowhere, or the interest rates go sky high, or there's this new state law and it affects things, it just changes, the landscape changes all the time. And, or people just lose money or lose interest in a project. So it's really hard for us to calculate, but we feel strongly about the 4.5. So we put that on the sheet for all of you to see. What my intention is that we can, we'll have for fiscal year 2027, we'll have a really good idea by the time we get there. And it's a lot easier to increase a project's budget rather than to try and cut it. So we went with the more conservative average number for the out years for the 5 years, giving us about $15 million to budget and kind of look at. Next slide. We also have a few other funding sources. There's Measure S, which we are requesting 1.6 million from. So that's not from that revenue projection. That's an additional funding source that the city has, which gets divided up under multiple departments and multiple projects. And our tree planting is pretty consistent year after year. Those funds come from when someone cuts down a heritage tree, they have to pay certain fees, and that's what we use for replanting the city. And that's a pretty standard thing. We also sometimes have additional funding from other areas, but in next fiscal year, these are the funding sources that are in addition to our Park and Leland Park and Rec fees. So this is the methodology. It's a pretty dense slide, but I tried to make it as readable as possible. There was a lot more. If you read your agenda report, there's a lot more to this. So I tried to kind of break it down and make it slide worthy, but obviously money, number one. Do we have the money to spend? Is it an identified priority, right? Certain things we know are a priority to the communities. Swimming pools. Our swimming pools are a priority. Our Central Park is a priority. Our East Hillsdale Park is a priority. These are identified priorities. The community has told us they are priorities. How much we've already spent, right? Sometimes you just need a little bit more money to get a project to the finish line. And that's the wise money, because you've already got the plans and the ball rolling and you just need to get it over the finish line. Is there matching funds? We have a grant, a small grant, funds for East Hillsdale. That helps. The location of the project, we can't do all the parks in one neighborhood and then move on to the next neighborhood. We need to sprinkle our resources across the city. And then sometimes it's just urgent, which, unfortunately happens. So that's kind of the way we sit and we talk about these things, and we prioritize and we negotiate with Public Works, because they're our partner in crime in this, and that's how we do that. Next slide. So we're requesting, because that's what we have to do, to the council, to this body, $5 billion in funding to allocate for fiscal year 25-26. And that's across the funding sources. And if you see, that kind of tracks with our 4.5 million. I know we have that Measure S money, which is, we don't always get that kind of Measure S money. So it roughly tracks, we try and track it that way, but that's overall the big picture. That's what we're trying to put into projects, put into these project bank accounts for next fiscal year. Next slide, please. So these are the ongoing projects that we are requesting additional funds for. These are projects that have already started, although I see an error. So I'll call that out when I get to it. So East Hillsdale. I did not know you were coming, and I did not put it on the top of the list for your benefit. But It is, we are asking for an additional amount of funding, primarily to pay for construction management, to allow our project manager to tackle more projects. Rather than being the construction manager, he can manage the construction manager and give him more bandwidth to tackle additional projects. Central Park Playground renovations, that funding, that $750,000 is also for us the same purpose. Additional funding that we are requesting to allow our project manager to have that construction management support for the project. It is a large project. It has a lot of moving parts, and having a construction manager that can keep an eye on everything will allow it to go smoothly and allow us to tackle other things and plan for other things that we need to do. King assessment and improvements. This is the number that I say we have our partnership with Public Works. This is the number that they have requested from our in lieu fees for next fiscal year. So that is close to $1 million. We already have put in a small amount of money to this project, but this is what they say they need to design or to start the process of designing, scoping, looking for grants, all of the things that we need to do what is going to be a very large project. Synthetic field replacement actually probably should have gone on the new projects. We had already put money, there's already some money available, which is probably why I stuck it here, because my brain thinks in the budget and not so much the groundbreaking side of things. So that is my mistake there. And then we were sort of encouraged to ask for $100,000 from Measure S to go towards the playground renovations, which you see. So that kind of just flushes out the budget and just makes sure there's enough there for that Central Park renovation to come to completion. And then tree planting, which is just our old standby that we have every year. And then next slide, please. So these are new projects, right? These are projects where we haven't started anything yet, but we are requesting funds for next fiscal year. And I can talk a little bit about why we're requesting them. So Parkside Aquatic Play Area has come to our attention as needing renovation. We already have some money set aside, but we decided that there was a lot of advantage to going ahead and it's 2 play structures, replacing both play structures at the same time, just economy of scale. So we're asking for additional funds for that. The Ryder Park water feature has not been working. The filtration system has issues. It's undersized, I guess, for the size of the play area. And so this money would be kind of the money we would use to, this $50,000 would be the money we would use to scope the project, kind of get a really good estimate, so that the following fiscal year we would know exactly how much money we need to move forward with redoing the filtration system. Japanese garden repairs is on our list. The fence, the pond needs some repairs. It's going to be more than this, but again, it's putting money in the bank account to kind of start planning the project, having some funds, because sometimes you have to spend a little money to do the scoping of the project. And then there'll be additional funds to follow. I'm sure you can see on your larger graph that there's more funds that will go in there. Childcare facilities improvements. We have 2 facilities that over the years have had childcare that have been kind of childcare only, Lakeshore and Shoreview. We need to figure out what direction those facilities, so that money would help us design and plan those. And then it's here too, because I forgot to take it off the first slide. That's my mistake. Again, synthetic field replacement. We're not doing 2 turf fields, it's just 1. And then tree planting, again, I forgot to take them off. Next slide. So the additional review that this process, our portion gets bundled up with all of the CIP for the entire city. It goes to preview to the city council in April for preview. And then all of these things will go for approval, hopefully, in June of 2025, making the funds available for next fiscal year, July 1. Next slide. So I have reached the end of what I have to really say about this, although we're very happy to discuss more with you. But this is our recommendation, and that is that you review and comment on our proposal.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Suzanne, for your presentation. Now I will open public comment if you have any. And just for the sake of the room, we will have public comment. Should there be any public comment, staff will have the opportunity to respond to public comment, and then the commission will have the opportunity to make comments or ask questions, and then offer discussion and feedback. But there is no formal vote on this matter. Very good. So with that, I will say, do we have any public comment on this item?
No public comment for this item.
Okay. Then I will close public comment for this item and bring it to the commission. I find myself that I often sort of start from the left and move to the right. So tonight I will start from the right and move to the left. And all of that is to give the folks on my right a few moments to sort of collect their thoughts. And I will say, Commissioner Ocampo, do you have thoughts, questions, questions or comments you'd like to share?
So personally, I've always wondered, when it comes to funding these type of projects, obviously there was already the INLU and general fund, et cetera, but have we ever thought of getting funds from either like almost like a sponsorship type thing, or corporate sponsorships? I know this is kind of out there, but
public-private partnerships.
yes, exactly, yeah. Especially when there's none of that fun.
Yeah. No, I think that's definitely something that the city is interested in pursuing. And I think that's in the works. So it's not something that we've done recently, but we're looking into it.
I've seen it before in certain cities, not necessarily renaming a park or anything, but having a playground dedicated to something, or I don't know, there's lots of different options I think for sponsorship. But I think it's great. No, it looks good to me. I'm really excited about the Parks at Aquatic Play area because I remember when that playground got installed when my kids were, before they were even born. So yes, that is an definite need of replacement. I'm happy to see on there. So yeah.
Anything else?
Nothing else.
Okay, very good. Commissioner Chiappi, questions or comments around the presentation?
Thank you, Susan, for your presentation. I think I have questions or comments. Well, the first one is about, you said that one of your considerations for allocating resources is whether there's already an investment into a project. So I'm curious about whether any of the projects that have been prioritized will be completed next fiscal year.
So any of the projects that will be completed next fiscal year.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm trying to think. Central Park is probably unlikely to. It's not going to be completed. And East Hillsdale will not be completed.
It might make it.
It might make it.
Might make it.
Okay.
East Hillsdale.
Next fiscal year. Okay, so we've got
Before
Like
the
in
end of
FY
the-
26,
yes,
you're
yes,
saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And then Central Park will be just over
Yeah.
into 26, 27.
Is for phase one.
Yes.
For phase
The
one.
playground
The
renovation.
And then we're hopeful that the skate park will be done next year as well.
We have some smaller things that we're working on that weren't really allocations of funds for this. Like, are a lot of the pour in place, the mat that's under the playgrounds We're working on repairs and stuff to that. These are smaller projects. Sunnybrae, the play equipment there, replacement, some smaller things that will be completed potentially, early in next fiscal year, but not.
Repairs and renovations at Laurel
Yeah.
play structure as well.
Yeah. Those are not typically bigger. They're kind of bundled in a repair replacement kind of project. So it's not like a single project item where we're bringing forward a recommendation for thing.
Right. And then I'm glad to see that the King Pool is going to receive some funding for assessment. I'm curious, is that 900,000 going to be allocated specifically to develop a plan?
So the assessment's already been done, and actually that was budgeted last fiscal year, and so the assessment came back, and we took an item to council for emergency repairs. So emergency repairs are going to happen prior to the swim season this summer. After, we expect the emergency repairs to get us a couple of more years of life at that aquatic facility. Which is also happening at Joinville. Joinville is also getting emergency repairs. And then there will be community impact, community outreach and feedback about upgrades and renovations to the King Center as a whole for improvements to become a resilient center. So it's both the pool and the building upgrades.
I think that's it for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Kiyaki. Commissioner Trapp, questions, comments?
Thank you, as always, Ms. Yvette. So is there a timeline on how long some of these things have kind of been on the list? So, have things kind of been getting shipped down because of your prioritization? Is that something you guys ever tried?
I mean, we could come. I don't have those numbers in front of me. We could, like Central Park, it's a large project, so it has to be on the list for a long time in order to accumulate enough funds. Because usually we don't have the total funding in 1 year to put in there. So that one I know has been around for quite some time. The East Hillsdale, again, that was like a project where they accumulate funds, they do one playground, they accumulate more funds, they do another playground. So the project itself has lived for a good long life. So that makes it a little bit harder to kind of track when things start and stop. But yeah, I mean, we had the recent addition to our staff of a year and a half of King, a full-time project manager, which that position was vacant. So things really have been, for us, it feels like we're moving very fast, but there is, what feels like all the work that has to be done before you see the construction, right? So like since he got here, he's been doing a lot, but it's all that preparatory work that has to be done. So if we have things, are able to build that pipeline, things should move a little quicker.
And then, of course, with publicly bid projects, there can always be things that go awry on the timeline. So for instance, with Central Park, we went out to bid in September and all of the bids were over the budget of the park. So we had to reject all the bids and do the value engineering, which took months. So we finally were able to get that contract awarded on Monday night. So we anticipated having that contract awarded in September and ended up being March. So it just adds time to a project, adds time and work to a project that you don't anticipate, which then can further delay other projects that you're working on because you don't anticipate having to do things that are so significantly labor intensive.
And I will say the city is embarking on, as a whole, and we're part of that, as a review of our process. And so, there may be, as far as like tracking timelines and stuff, we may have more of that ability to do that in the future.
Yeah, the city has this fiscal year they've done facilities conditions assessment for the buildings, that the city owns. And so working with a consultant to gather that information to have better, knowledge about what repairs and things need to be prioritized. And then in addition, they have a consultant that's working to determine what the best practices are for our CIP process. So in implementing those. So we're really excited about that.
There are two items that you have on that you mentioned, Central Park area upgrade. I think that was a 5K, 500K, and then the city park, I'm sorry, Central Park at 750K. And then I think I may have misunderstood what you said, because you were alluding to it was going to free up team's time. So that means, is that a salary or something like that?
Yeah, that's a contractor.
So that
Yeah, I mean,
for 1 year-
do you want to speak to what a construction manager will do for us?
Absolutely. During the construction phase, after we have secured a general contractor, the contractor needs to be managed. Make sure that they fulfill the requirements of the contract documents. As a project manager, I can do that, but it takes time. It takes a lot of time to be out in the field, to watch what they're doing. Some operations are more intensive. If you're digging underground, you have to be there almost every day. For other tasks, less so. It could be every other day or once a week. So, and I'm only one person if I'm going to manage Central Park and East Hillsdale. That may not be the best use of my time to be standing around watching people move dirt. So the city manager has recommended that we secure a construction manager to take over those tasks. Professionals who, by trade and by experience, go out in the field and watch and do the physical inspections, and then report back to me. So you can see that they do the heavy lifting, they bring me the results, and we discuss as city representative, and construction manager, the next, appropriate step if there's an issue. But having a construction manager, as Suzanne said, frees up my time to focus on the upfront work, to scope out other projects, scope, budget, schedule, and put together packages, informational packages for Joanne to analyze and Suzette to prioritize as far as funding. So it's a necessary process for any project, big or small. It's how you manage your dollars, how you manage the improvements, because you have to convince your stakeholders to do what we're doing. And you have to agree to it so that the scope of work is approved. And any type of change of scope of work has to come back to you, because there has to be change control. You just can't keep changing the scope. That becomes the favorite term of the industry is scope creep. So in a nutshell, that's
and your other question was, those will be competitively bid contractors. So we will say, hey, we need someone to bid on these construction management contracts, and then we will award a contract to the best qualified, lowest bidder.
And then they also oversee special inspections.
yes.
So there's a lot of value from that sort of, talking about that pipeline, there's a lot of value to having that, to, see more outcome from your dollar. And also we know things are just going up the cost. So the more we can spend today, like the more value we get from it.
Well, and the delay in the Central Park project kind of ran up against the start of the East Hillsdale project. So they're literally probably going to be starting at very similar times. So it's just challenging to manage both of those things going, kicking off at the same time.
All of that, thank you. All of that I understood. I'm curious, so that 507, is that one person, one company? Is that, like, what are we getting for each one of those? That's just one person?
Well, that's just the budgeting. We don't know what the contracts will come back as. They bid competitively. I don't know,
Usually the construction management, contractors will put forth a proposal and they will lay out how they will manage the project with, different estimates associated with how that happens, but normally they designate one manager from their organization to manage that specific project. So yeah, the estimation could be 500,000, it could be 750,000, it just depends on the scope and the hours and, what their fee proposal will look like.
Here's the lovely thing. If King doesn't spend all the money on Central Park, it can go into other projects. So we have it's a bit, to not have any delays, we want to make sure we have enough money. Think about you're remodeling your kitchen and you get to the last bit and you don't have enough money, and you have to stop work. That is our enemy, is stopping work. We do not want to stop work. So if we have to go back to city council and ask for more money, so those are our estimates, but it may not be that much. It's not like we're going to say this is what it costs. This is what King has a lot of knowledge in this area. We've estimated. We've looked at our total budget that we already have, and we're trying to get us to a place where we have enough money that we're in no danger of having to go back and ask for more money.
So the only other thing I would add to that is construction management services is usually a portion of the project. So they estimate it to be between 5 and 15% of the total budget for the project. So that's why you see that estimation.
And just my last question, thank you for that. So of the 5 million that you are asking for just this fiscal year, is it fair that I'm looking at the spreadsheet that's on page number 8, and so it's the budgeting that you have here. Has there been any call out of what's been, I guess we really don't need to know this, but like what's been taken out for you're not going to be doing for that 5 million? Was that ever presented as to what this is what we de-scoped or decided not?
Yeah, we deprioritized. Well, did we deprioritize anything? Because the other portion of making these decisions, making these calls, is what we have actually the capacity to execute, right? We don't want to put money in the bank that we can't spend. We want to in the project plan. Yeah, help me out.
We deprioritized Laurelwood clay structure equipment replacement. We chose to renovate the existing clay structure, to buy a couple more years, to get more life out of the existing, and push the project out 2 more years. The total replacement of the clay structure there would be about, is it 2 million?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So that was one instance of deprioritization.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Commissioner Trapp. Vice Chair Wisher, I imagine you have a few questions and comments.
I do, and I imagine that the staff is very well prepared. Thanks for the presentation. Just to make sure that I'm reading things correctly, ignorant question. What's the difference between black and green numbers in the spreadsheet?
Yeah, that is new projects versus like projects that kind of are newer, new funded projects, right? So
are the green ones?
Which is black,
green.
which is green?
Great. The green are the newer.
The new, yeah.
I'm sorry, new or new?
Well, sometimes they're on a list for a while and they have out year funding, but
Right.
This is like the first year they have money going into them, right? Like they're going.
I see.
Yeah.
So if it's a green, then it's
new.
The first year that there's money going into it.
Newly funded.
Newly funded.
All right. Awesome. Thanks. What is a resiliency center? Because I actually searched on the web to find out what a resiliency center is, and there's quite a bit of money going into the King Center. You noted that Resiliency Center is part of the future consideration for it. What is it?
So, per the grant funding requirements, we have a definition.
Some federal grant?
Yes.
That
So
we're still getting.
right now, yes.
Okay.
A completed resilience hub facility would have the following features. So a temporary shelter in times of disaster, and the hub could provide emergency sleeping quarters, meal distribution, sanitary restroom, and shower facilities. Energy power and public Wi-Fi access cell phone charging stations, energy efficient HVAC to provide a cooling environment in times of excessive heat waves or warming stations during periods of extreme cold weather, and city or partner-sponsored educational programs to train community members on personal preparedness at home, and then just a welcoming environment for San Mateo citizens, and an operations program that would serve as a model for future resilience hubs. So that's the definition for the grant.
Great. Given that we live in an earthquake, flood, and heat wave prone area, I think that's a very good investment. People are going to need that at some point. When they need it, they're really going to need it. Looking at the spreadsheet, you mentioned that there is more money going into the Japanese gardens. So am I reading correctly that there's $650K that you're planning on requesting in the fiscal year after next, so 26, 27?
Mm-hmm.
All right. And that looks like that's the sum total of what's going to be needed for the Japanese gardens.
We believe so.
Hopefully the price of wood keeps going up. So it's, and it's very specialized. The garden is very specialized. And so, we may next year find out that we need to add even more money. But it's for the fencing, the roofing, at the tea house, and the renovations of the pond.
So we even, to speak to how specialized it is, we asked someone from Public Works to get us just a quick bid on the fence, just to make sure we were in the right ballpark. It took him quite some time because the fencing contractors who he normally works with, and they're like, here you go. We're like, oh, okay, well, we're gonna have to find the right people to make this fence. You know, this is not just your standard fence that we make every day, every place, right? So it's pretty specialized. We estimate that a decent amount of that budget will go towards the fence, because if you think about it, it's actually quite long. So a decent amount of the budget will go to the fence. And the idea of splitting it over 2 years is we have a major renovation kicking off in Central Park. We don't want to close down too much of the park at one time. So that one can wrap up, and then we can start to renovate this area, because, you know, that's going to impact the user experience of the park. So not to take away too many amenities at one time.
Great, thanks. That all makes sense. I think I mentioned before I lived in Japan for a year. So the comment about how specialized it is hits home with me. It is not construction for Japanese culture. It is an art form, literally. And things in there actually have religious significance. It's an incredible space, and I'm glad we're going to take good care of it. Childcare facility improvements, there's $150K for an assessment. What's involved in the assessment? What's the work product going to be? So what will we be holding in our hands after $150,000 has gone out?
Yeah, I mean, it's assessing what we currently have and what upgrades we can make in order to, or scrapping a building and starting over, determining which is the more favorable aspect to pursue. I think we're interested in trying to provide licensed childcare at our facilities. And in order to do that, there are requirements such as fire sprinklers and HVAC. And so that's robust improvements for these aged facilities that we utilize. So we're trying to assess what would the costs be associated with that, what would the process be, what would the timeline be, and so, and looking at both facilities, that we utilize for our preschool programs, both Shoreview and Lakeshore.
And just from a technical standpoint, you know, when we put money into a project for the scoping, like for Ryder Park, if we don't need all of those funds, they just roll into the project budget, right? So we kind of estimate, but we don't have to be super accurate in our estimate, because if it costs $140,000 to do this work, then $10,000 just carries over into the project budget. So, you know, there's no real we don't try and get, this is so we can get the exact numbers of what we actually need to have in the project budget.
Right, your intention, you're not going out with the intention of spending it all
No.
on this. Your intention is to make sure that you have enough.
Yeah.
And maybe something left over. Yeah, and I think we'd all agree that if you're doing childcare, then it's not something you do halfway. You do it seriously, you do it well. Assessment again, and I think this is my last question. I believe Commissioner Trapp brought this up quickly. The line item on page 8, 600,000 for a parks amenities assessment in not this coming fiscal year, but the fiscal year after. What is included in park amenities? And is this for all 32 parks that we have?
31, but yes.
31.
Yeah.
You don't know about-
So yes, there's a different one that you haven't told me about. So yeah, so we would like to, much like the assessment that was done for our city facilities, have a better understanding of what different things we have in all of our parks. So some of our parks have tennis courts, some of our parks have basketball courts, bocce courts, fields, lighting, gardens, you know, all kinds of different amenities, restrooms. And we'd like to understand what is there when it was put there, or how often do we need to maintain it, you know, what kind of cycles, so what kind of modernization needs to be done. So it's to really have a better understanding so that this process is a little bit more straightforward and helpful for all of us in prioritizing what needs to get done. So.
Well, in business, if you're doing manufacturing, it's incredibly helpful to have a schedule for maintenance. And the more complicated the situation, the more important that schedule is. So totally get the need for that. A couple quick comments then. Super happy that Ryder Park will get that water feature going again. The tidal basin feature there, amazing, just unique in the park system in the Bay Area. And East Hillsdale, while I am quite nostalgic about the stainless steel jungle gym and slide, it was there probably when I was a boy in the 60s. I'm so glad that we're finally moving on this.
So just to provide a quick update on that, we have done our pre-bid qualification, and so we will be going out to bid very soon for that project. So we will start to see movement here quickly.
And I'll have to get over there to that metal slide, you know, before
All
you
of the
tear it down.
equipment is dispersed.
Do it on a very hot day.
Yeah.
When the sun's still shining on it with shorts.
Okay.
Like right at like 12.
Okay.
It's very important.
Experience.
Yeah.
An experience.
It'll bring back so much memories for me.
Great window. Thank you.
Excellent. Very good. So I have a few questions. I'm curious sort of where we are in terms of in fees banked right now.
We actually, I think, have. I didn't bring that number.
I will happily receive
I think it's-
an update at the
yeah.
next
I
meeting.
think it's
Okay.
over 20 million though, isn't it?
Well, that, I mean, that's what we have, but not, you mean, I think she means not allocated to projects, or you mean total?
I'm curious about what's like in the bank right now that is allocated, and also there's unallocated funds that are.
Okay, so yeah, I think we're around 20 million, close to 20 million is what we have in the bank. Obviously, like 13 million-ish is sitting in Central Park project. You know, another couple million in East Hillsdale project.
I don't think it's obvious necessarily to this
Okay.
commission, like how it's been allocated, so like I guess maybe my ask is, at our next meeting,
Mhm.
give an update on sort of what's banked and where it's been allocated and what's not allocated. I think would be a good update for this commission. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So yeah, so we have like the big chunk of money, right, in sitting in a project is Central Park. So knowing that, I think it's been, you know, we've had these high numbers in that account, if you want to call it that, for a long time, knowing that Central Park is going to draw down our amount that we have. I think we have a few million that is unallocated. The really big thing is right now we are kind of funding the King Resiliency Center, but the projected expenses on that are very high. So we are not going to be able to fund it with in lieu fees only. And so depending on how much other funding sources we can find to redo the MLK Center, that's going to determine how much can go of those, you know, what can go to parks. And that's kind of that balance. And I think that's kind of the reason I had that slide at the beginning showing you the overall. And when you looked at facilities and parks, facilities are just much more expensive than, you know, even a very expensive park. They're very expensive to create and maintain, and parks, you know, are not. And so our in lieu fees, you know, we want to focus them as much as we can on parks and find other funding sources for the facilities, right? I think is kind of the goal, to improve our facilities, because we have facilities that are all about the same age. Sorry.
Vintage 60s mostly, yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
So kind of on the topic of facilities, to what extent is bringing facilities into ADA compliance a factor in all of this, and particularly with thinking about childcare facilities, will getting childcare facilities into a place where they can be licensed childcare facilities also trigger ADA compliance?
Of course. ADA compliance is triggered every time you do anything, and that's actually one of the things that increases the scope and the price of a project, because you literally have to start with a path of travel. So ADA compliance starts in the parking lot or the sidewalk. So you have to make those improvements into the facility as well as within the facility. So every city is required to have an ADA transition plan. That happened, I think, in the 90s and 2000s, where they went and they assessed different areas and they give you a certain time frame in order to make those improvements. So there is budget within the facilities budget to make those improvements. But anytime we do a project, so any upgrades that are done at the King Center will trigger all ADA access improvements.
The
as
King
well.
Center is not ADA.
Well, they are, but there are improvements that can be made. So, you know, laws change and they make changes to widths and, you know, so, there's new parking requirements, and some of the improvements that you've seen out at Beresford have to do with slope. And so, you know, it's getting into compliance. And so that's another thing that gets triggered no matter what you do at any facility to be upgrades.
So in addition to sort of perhaps for the next meeting or some future meeting,
Yes.
a better understanding of sort of the new fees, where they're allocated, and sort of where there's opportunity. I think I'd like to suggest in my comments perhaps a joint meeting with the Measure S Oversight Committee, since it seems like there's some intersection between priorities of this commission and Measure S funding. If we could be reminded sort of where Measure S funding comes from and some of, if there's restrictions around those funds.
I think it's a general
yeah.
tax and, it's for city improvements, so streets and all kinds
It's
of
quite broad.
infrastructure, even staffing can come out, staffing, funds come out of Measure S, so it's pretty broad.
So that anything to
No, I mean, like, yeah, Measure S helps us with our Get Around program. Measure S helps us with our mobile rec program. It's not just these projects, but the constraints on that are, one, the amount of money coming in, and two, the commission, Measure S commission, is it commission?
It's
an
Oversight committee, has to, approve any of that. So, we can have our finance director say, yeah, that sounds like a good idea, but if they don't approve it, then.
well, they make a recommendation.
Yeah.
So kind of like what you're doing here for our feedback, they do the same.
So if there may be something worthwhile in having a joint meeting, if that's a possibility. Or just more information. Additionally, I know we've had some questions from this commission around the Parks and Rec Foundation. One of my fellow commissioners, I think it was Commissioner Ocampo, who asked about sort of public-private partnerships. I think an update or some information from the foundation might be useful if that's a possibility. I don't know, but I'd like to sort of throw it out there as a suggestion. The other thing that I'm curious about is sort of where we are in terms of a lifetime of equipment. It seems like we have a lot of playground equipment and other equipment across our wonderful parks, which are truly the gem of our city, that are sort of exceeded their useful lifetime. How do we get to a place where we understand that, and are there any safety concerns? I know we all sort of joked about steel and metal, but are there any sort of liabilities that we
So
need to be
I
worried
think
about?
I can talk a little bit about that, which might actually make you feel a little better.
Great, I would love that.
So there has always been some funding through Public Works to do repairs and small projects on our playground equipment. Our title, what's his new title? It's your old title. Fleet and Facilities Manager. Asked for a budget increase to that budget, a significant budget increase. So he has now a much larger budget to do repairs. However, that funding just came through this year. These things still take time to get everything done. But he has funding for this fiscal year, funding for next fiscal year, totaling, I think, overall $1 million. And that is just for repairs, replacements of small things, right? So like I was talking about our pour in place, the mat that goes under the playground, that is where we're getting the funding to do that. So I think that if that funding continues and we're able to use it and execute, we will continue to see that money coming through, and it should improve those sorts of issues that we're having.
So the assessment is intended to determine, what we have, and, again, just because we installed something in 2000 doesn't mean that it has, is in need of repairs necessarily. There are certain types of equipment that have not lasted as well, that have been installed much more recently, potentially, and it depends on how much sun is on these, the elements that come into play, and so what type of materials our playgrounds are made out of. Some are made out of wood, some are made out of plastic, some are made out of metal. So it's a whole host of things, and this analysis and assessment will help us with that information. Anytime we have a safety issue, we will either close the area or we will remove the piece of equipment. So we don't like to have to do that. So we try to stay up on our maintenance as much as we can. But there are times where we have had to remove something without having budget or time to install, and replace. And I know that's very frustrating for the community, so we try and, be more proactive.
I appreciate all of that and know that, you know, we're very fortunate to have dedicated city staff that always, you know, our best interests. With that, I will ask my fellow commissioners any further comments, and I will just remind everyone, there's no item to vote on here, we're just sort of giving feedback, but if there's sort of further comment from any of my commissioners, you know, if something came up, something you feel needs to be spoken into the public record. Anybody. Very good. Well, I will say, Suzette, thank you very much for your presentation, and thank you so much for fielding all of our questions. I think that our staff does an incredible job with a number of resources. Like I said, sort of in passing, truly our parks and our recreation facilities, buildings that are very expensive, are truly the gem of our city, and we're all very lucky to be here in San Mateo. With that, I will say thank you. I hope you got some good feedback, and we will move on to reports and announcements.
Yes, I have a few. Thank you. So huge milestone on Monday night, having our Central Park Playground contract awarded. And so be on the lookout for a groundbreaking invitation to be forthcoming that I hope you can all join us for. So it will be very exciting, and we're hoping to have that next month. So the only other important dates that I'd like to announce, State of the City is happening on Monday, the 10th, this coming Monday, at 6 p.m. at the library in the Oak Room, and our mayor will be sharing his insights into our achievements of 2024 and our plans for 2025. We are asking for RSVP if possible, so if you can find the link online, that would be great. Not to say that you can't attend if you don't RSVP. And then our summer camp and aquatics registration dates are next week. Residents can register on Tuesday, March 11th at 9, non-residents on the 13th at 9 a.m. And then just a side note, registration for programming at the Joinville Pool is delayed until April. Just in case anything happens with the repairs, we don't want to register a bunch of people and then have to issue refunds. So we're trying to just make sure that the repairs can happen prior to having people register. And then just another reminder about our Police Activities League annual fundraiser, our Lights and Sirens Awards and Recognition Dinner will be held on Friday, April the 11th at the San Mateo County Event Center. So hopefully you can join us for that and register online. And then finally, our Extravaganza, our 48th annual Extravaganza is happening on the Saturday before Easter, so on April 19th from 9 to 12:30 in Central Park. So hope you guys can join us for that. There'll be egg hunts and costume contests and all sorts of crafts and performances and food trucks. So that is all that I have.
Wonderful. Do my fellow commissioners, any announcements? Seeing none. With that, I will say thank you, everyone, and this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
I do push this side over.
I know, right?